Hello, I'm Ardell. At dinner, my sister threw hot tea in my face because I wouldn't hand her my credit card. But that wasn't the worst part. The truth? She'd been quietly draining my name for years, stealing, lying, even rewriting our mother's will. They cut me out of family photos, out of birthdays, out of the very house I paid for. How did I stay silent so long? And why did no one ever ask what really happened that night? Dinner was supposed to be simple. That's what I kept telling myself on the way over, clutching the homemade salad I'd prepared, the one nobody ever really eats. A courtesy dish, like my presence, like most of what I've done for this family. It was a cool September evening in Columbus, the kind where the sun sets early, but the air still smells like summer trying to hold on. I pulled up to my mother's house, our childhood home, though I've long stopped calling it mine, and parked in the same cracked spot on the driveway I always did. The porch light flickered like it always had. Nothing changes here, not even the parts that should. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with noise, wine glasses clinking, kids shrieking down the hallway, Leora's laugh, loud and performative, carving through the air like it always does when she knows she has an audience. My mother, Velma, sat at the head of the table, regal in her silence, wine glass already half empty. Leora hovered over the table like it was a stage built just for her. "You're late," she said, smiling like a snake. "Hope you brought something more useful than that rabbit food." I set the bowl down, without a word. Dinner went the way these things usually do. Leora recounting some drama about her assistant messing up a client file. Mom nodding dutifully, the kids tapping at their phones. I picked up my plate, trying to shrink into my chair, trying to stay invisible. But I never could stay invisible around Leora. Not when I refused to play my part. "Actually," she said, stabbing her fork into the air like a conductor, "I've got a thing at work. Conference in Nashville. You can spot me the hotel. I'll Venmo you when the invoice clears." I blinked. "What?" "You know, just charge it. Your credit card, like always." I shook my head. "I can't do that this time." The room stilled a little. The background noise, forks, footsteps, even the fridge's hum, seemed to dull. "What do you mean you can't?" she said, still smiling, though her eyes sharpened. "You're not broke, are you?" "It's not about that," I said calmly. "I just don't want to," she scoffed. "You wouldn't even have that card if it weren't for me telling you how to build your credit in the first place." That wasn't true. But truth doesn't matter in my family, not when Leora starts performing. And let's be honest, you're barely using it. You live like a hermit. No man, no kids, no house. What do you need money for? I stood up slowly, trying to hold on to my dignity, like a thread slipping through my fingers. "Leora, I said no." And then it happened. She grabbed her mug, one of those oversized ceramic ones still steaming, and flung the contents right into my face. It wasn't a full cup, but it was hot enough. The sting hit my cheekbone, the side of my neck, and soaked the collar of my blouse. My fork dropped. The kids gasped. I didn't scream. I just froze. Silence. My mother, still holding her wine like a prop, barely blinked. "Don't upset your sister," she murmured. "She's had a long week." I looked around the room. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. My niece, sweet thing, hesitantly passed me a napkin, eyes wide. Her father muttered, "It's just tea." Just tea. I blotted my skin, trying not to tremble. It wasn't the burn that hurt. It was the way they all sat there, watching, like this was an uncomfortable commercial break they had to sit through before the program resumed. I excused myself. The ride home was silent. No music, no tears. Just the sound of tires on pavement and the faint hiss of betrayal still ringing in my ears. My neck stung where the tea had landed, but inside? Inside felt worse, because this wasn't new. This was just the first time it left a mark everyone could see. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Hair pulled back in a bun, the stain on my collar already drying into a memory. I touched my cheek, not sure whether the warmth came from the tea or the humiliation. "That's the last time," I whispered. Not a threat, not a vow, just truth. By the time I made it home, the street was quiet, and my neighbor's porch lights had already flicked off. I left my coat on the hook by the door, stepped out of my shoes, and let the silence wrap around me. It was past midnight, but I didn't crawl into bed. I sat on the edge of the couch, lights off, staring into the dim room like it held answers I hadn't earned yet. The next morning, the light from the window slid across my kitchen table. I stood by the sink, letting the water run over my hands longer than necessary. The skin on my cheek was still a soft pink. The memory of last night burned into it like a reminder. Not just of the tea, but of everything before it. That wasn't the first time Leora asked for my card. I'd handed it over more times than I cared to count. Gas for her SUV, a last-minute dress for a fundraiser, a hotel room when she claimed her work expenses needed a backup. She never paid me back. She always said she would, and I never asked. My silence had been my signature. My guilt? My currency. I used to think helping made me good. Useful. If I gave enough, maybe I'd finally be seen as something more than the extra chair they never needed at the table. But this time, I said no. And for that, I got burned. It wasn't the physical sting that stuck with me. It was that familiar sinking weight. Like I'd violated an unspoken contract. Like I'd forgotten my place. I sat down with a cup of coffee I didn't really want and stared out the window. Across the street, the neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel. Normal life happening in parallel to mine, like we were existing on two different channels. The sound of my phone vibrating on the counter snapped me out of the fog. A message from Leora. You need to grow up and stop acting like a victim. You embarrassed Mom. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another version of the same script she'd been reading off for years. I deleted the message without answering. I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I stared at the screen for a while before typing the title, Receipts. No plan yet. Just the start of something. Maybe a record, maybe protection, or maybe just proof, for myself, that it wasn't all in my head. As the cursor blinked, my mind drifted to another night I'd buried deep. It was 8 years ago. Dad's retirement dinner. A fancy restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, printed menus, the whole production. Leora organized everything, of course. She picked the venue, the food, the playlist. When I arrived, there was no seat for me at the family table. Leora looked me up and down like I was the help. Oh, can you just help with drinks? We're running behind. So I did. I poured wine, cleared plates, and avoided the gaze of distant relatives who couldn't quite remember my name. Leora gave a toast that night. She raised her glass and said, "Everything we are is because we show up for each other." Everyone clapped. I stood near the kitchen entrance, out of sight, out of mind. At one point, I whispered to myself, maybe next year, I'll be part of it. I never was. Later that same night, I heard her talking to a cousin from New Jersey, loud enough that she wanted me to hear. "I'm the one carrying this family. Ardell just freeloads." I laughed when she said it. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I would have cried. She didn't see me setting up the slide projector. She didn't see me pay for the Uber for Aunt Rosie when her car broke down. She didn't see any of it. And when you're invisible long enough, even you start to forget you exist. Back in the present, the coffee had gone cold. I dumped it in the sink. I grabbed my planner from the side table and opened to a blank page. I started writing down dates, not just the money, the moments. Every time I'd said yes, every time I'd been told to be quiet, every time my mother told me to be the bigger person, which always meant the silent one. This wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was a start. And for once, I wasn't waiting for permission. 3 days passed. Not one message from Mom, not a single check-in from Leora, not even to justify what she'd done. I wasn't surprised. That kind of silence wasn't new. It was the same silence that followed after every insult they dressed up as concern, every holiday I spent watching from the sidelines. But this time, something had shifted. The old numbness had weight to it, a heaviness I didn't want to carry anymore. I was in the middle of cleaning out old paperwork from a drawer near the front door, mostly junk, expired coupons, bills already paid, when the email came through. Credit alert. Suspicious activity on your account. I paused. At first I thought it might be spam. Then I saw the logo. It was from my actual bank. My breath hitched as I clicked the link and logged in. Overdue payment notices, new credit inquiries, a department store card I didn't recognize, opened 6 months ago under my name. I hadn't opened any new accounts in over 2 years. The address on file? My parents' house? The one Leora still bounced in and out of like it was hers. A knot started forming in my stomach. I called the bank, tried to keep my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. The woman on the line was polite, professional, and efficient. She pulled up my file, confirmed multiple charges, new purchases, a maxed-out card in my name. Then came the bombshell. She had a scanned receipt on file for one of the big-ticket items, a flat-screen TV. She emailed it over. I opened the attachment, and there it was, Leora's handwriting, her swooping L's and dramatic slant. She'd forged my signature, signed for something using my name like it was a costume she could wear whenever it suited her. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, the printed receipt trembling in my hand. I didn't even care about the TV. It could have been socks. It could have been dog food. What broke me was the betrayal, the audacity, the fact that she knew I wouldn't check, that she counted on it. I opened my laptop and pulled up the receipts document I'd started just a few days earlier. Line by line, I began typing. Flat screen TV, $1,399. Store card opened without consent 6 months ago. Charges flagged. 5 in total signature. Forged. I paused, then added 2 words in bold, criminal behavior. Then I kept going. Gas for Leora, 5 times. Groceries for Mom, weekly last summer. Dental bill for Mason, $640. Her son, dress for gala, she had to attend, $198. New tires for her SUV. You don't want me driving the kids around on bald tires, do you? $780. All of it came back like pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was building. I hadn't kept receipts back then. I didn't think I needed to. I trusted her. And when I didn't trust her, I trusted my family to notice. To stop her. They never did. Once, when I'd mentioned the money to Mom, just in passing, she waved her hand and said, "Oh, Leora's always been a bit dramatic. Don't keep score. It's family." That was the moment I stopped asking for fairness. I just handed over the card and swallowed whatever pride I had left. But now I opened my journal, flipped to an old entry from last year. Am I being used or just convenient? I stared at the sentence. The ink had faded slightly, but the pain in it hadn't. I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper, then closed the journal. No more convenience, no more silence. I drafted an email to the bank's fraud department. Halfway through, I stopped. Something about sending it electronically didn't sit right. Leora was tech-savvy. She knew how to dig through emails, check shared cloud folders, even hack an account if she wanted. I didn't trust that this would stay between me and the bank if I sent it online, so I printed everything. Hard copies, evidence. I stapled them together and slid them into a folder I labeled by hand. Legal. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. But it was a step, a declaration, a private protest against a woman who'd spent decades convincing everyone I was the crazy one, the lazy one, the ungrateful little sister who just needed to try harder. I looked at myself in the mirror across the room. My reflection didn't flinch this time. The pink mark on my cheek from the tea had faded, but something else had taken its place. Something sharper. Not rage, not even sadness. Resolve. She crossed a line, I said out loud, barely recognizing the steadiness in my own voice, a line she couldn't charm her way back over. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight. I remember that because I sat at the kitchen table long enough to hear it taper off, first a drumming, then just a whisper against the window. I'd stayed up organizing the folder I'd labeled legal, but I hadn't touched it since I zipped it into the bottom of my bag. It was strange. For once, I wasn't scrambling to justify my anger. I didn't need to write another journal entry to talk myself down. I just needed sleep. And space. By Wednesday evening, I had both, until my cousin Dana texted me. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Leora's big night." My chest tightened. Big night? What big night? I scrolled through Dana's message again, slower this time, then flipped over to Facebook. The first post on my feed was from Mom. Proud of my firstborn, our rock, our glue, our everything. Join us tonight to celebrate all she does for this family. There was a banner in the photo. I squinted, then clicked. It read, "Appreciation Night for Leora." The picture was taken inside my house, the one I owned, the one I had rented back to the family when I moved into the apartment to regroup. No one had told me. I stared at the post for a full minute. Not a message, not a call, just a banner, just applause. That house still had my name on the deed, my name on the insurance, my name on the loan. But somehow they managed to throw a party there and honor her like she built it brick by brick. I didn't reply to Dana. Instead, I slipped on a jacket, tucked the folder into my shoulder bag, and drove. The house glowed warm against the blue dusk when I pulled up. Cars lined the driveway. Balloons bobbed gently on the porch railing. I parked a block away and walked the last bit on foot. My palms itched. My breath steadied itself, almost too calm. I didn't use the front door. I used my key and entered through the back like I was the help. The smell of catered food wafted from the kitchen. Garlic bread, pasta, those overpriced little meatballs in brown sugar glaze. Laughter echoed from the living room. And there it was. The banner. "Thank you, Leora." Someone had propped framed photos on the mantel. Leora at church events, Leora with her kids, Leora posing in front of a sold sign like she had bought the house. None of me, not a single photo. I scanned them twice, even the photo of Dad's old retirement dinner. My hand was cropped out of the frame. In another, the graduation photo I remember hanging in my old bedroom, Leora wore my sash, the one I'd earned. My name had been whited out. I don't know what I expected. Aunt Rosie stood near the punch bowl, laughing a little too loud. "She's basically the one who bought this place," she said to no one in particular. My mother, leaning beside her, waved her hand in that way she always did when she didn't want to lie, but didn't want to tell the truth either. Well, she's earned it. I walked slowly past them, unnoticed. I didn't say anything. I just filmed. Each banner, each frame, the cake with her name, the guest book someone had left on the coffee table, and the envelope. It sat near the stack of party favors, half tucked under a placemat. My name printed on the upper corner. Property tax notice. Still under my address. My signature, not Leora's. I took it. I slipped it into my bag the same way I'd slid my dignity under my breath for the last 10 years. Quietly, like it didn't matter to anyone but me. I moved through the house like a ghost. I wasn't crying, I wasn't shaking, but something inside me was reshaping. They hadn't just erased me. They replaced me. I paused at the hallway mirror before leaving. Fixed my hair, straightened my collar, smoothed the line of my jaw with the back of my hand. When I stepped out the front door, I did it slowly. Nobody looked up. Nobody asked where I'd come from, and that was fine. I walked to the sidewalk, then to the car, and I smiled. Not the kind you wear for photos, but the kind that slices. That would be the last party they ever threw in my name. I didn't go home right away. I drove past my apartment complex, circled the block twice, and finally pulled into the lot of a diner that stayed open past midnight. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car, the engine off, windows fogging, the quiet too loud to ignore. My hand stayed on the wheel long after I'd parked, as if I needed to feel something solid that hadn't been taken from me yet. Somewhere between the silence and the low hum of a truck passing on the highway, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. Not in the way I used to. Not the sharp, hot kind that wanted to scream or throw something. This was different. Like my body had absorbed every betrayal and now carried it like scar tissue. No longer bleeding, just thick and permanent. By Saturday afternoon, the air had cooled again. Autumn was creeping in without permission, like Leora. The kind of cold that wasn't sharp, but slow and steady. The type that made your bones feel older than they were. I hadn't planned on going to the house again. I only wanted to pick up an old quilt and some mortgage papers I'd filed away in my childhood closet. Simple, in and out, quiet. But the driveway told a different story. Rows of cars, laughter spilling out through cracked windows, a balloon caught in the wind, tugging against the porch railing. I paused at the curb and checked the address, not because I doubted it was mine, but because everything about it felt like a stranger had moved in and hung up new wallpaper. I slipped around the side and used the key. Same lock I'd installed 2 years ago. Same creak in the back door hinge. Different world inside. Streamers, trays of hors d'oeuvres, folding chairs. People I hadn't seen since high school sipping white wine and calling my sister a force. A banner stretched across the living room wall in gold lettering. Thank you, Leora, for everything you've built. My feet didn't move right away. The words hit like a slap, not because they were loud, but because they were stolen. I'd built this house. I paid the down payment. I negotiated the interest rate. I fixed the leaky pipes, and there they were, toasting her as if she'd laid the foundation herself with her bare hands and a prayer. I stepped inside. No one turned. No one asked how I was. One woman brushed past me to grab a napkin and muttered, "Excuse me," like I was a piece of misplaced furniture. I didn't speak, just walked the hallway toward what used to be my bedroom. On the way, I paused at the wall. It used to be a collection of mismatched frames, vacation photos, family dinners, holiday snapshots. Now it was curated, uniform, sterile, every picture perfectly aligned, perfectly staged, and not one of me. The 4th of July photo, where I held Leora's youngest, replaced with a solo shot of her and the baby. The Thanksgiving table shot where I carved the turkey, gone. In its place, Leora pouring cider beside our mother, both smiling like nothing had ever been broken. In the bathroom, I found another, a printed quote beneath a framed image of Leora in front of the fireplace. The soul of this family. I didn't cry. Instead, I went into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down the quilt. I found the file box and thumbed through until I saw the envelope marked mortgage records. The corner was dog-eared, but it was still intact, still mine. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. I didn't look upset, just done. In the kitchen, I spotted a notepad beside the fridge and a pen that said, "Leora for local council," on the side. Of course. I tore off a sheet and wrote in small, steady letters. This was never yours. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I left it next to the fruit bowl. On my way out, I passed 2 women by the door. One of them said, "She should be grateful, honestly. Leora's done so much for her." They didn't realize I was close enough to hear. I didn't flinch, didn't stop. By the time I reached my car, the only thing I felt was the weight of the envelope in my tote, and the quiet certainty that something had shifted. Not in them, in me. They could crop me out of every photo they liked, but I remembered every frame I used to be in. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I hadn't set an alarm, hadn't meant to rise so early, but my mind was already working before my feet hit the floor. The envelope from the party sat on the kitchen table where I'd left it the night before. I didn't touch it right away. I poured coffee, stared out the window while it brewed, and tried to convince myself that today would be just another day. It wasn't. At 10 a.m., I met Deidre at the attorney's office downtown. She had called me 2 days earlier, hesitating before saying, "I think you should see something, and I didn't want to tell you over the phone." The office was cold and clinical, with art prints of abstract landscapes and a receptionist who smiled too brightly. Deidre was already seated, flipping through her phone nervously, and stood as soon as she saw me. "I'm sorry," she whispered as we sat down together. "I thought you knew." The attorney, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun and calm demeanor, greeted us and laid out the paperwork like it was a routine update. "This is the latest version of your mother's estate planning," she said, sliding the packet forward. "We received instructions and notarized signatures 3 months ago." I didn't need to read the entire document. My eyes scanned directly for what mattered. My name. It wasn't there. Not in the list of beneficiaries. Not in the handwritten notes at the end. Not even a mention in the "in case of dispute" clause. But Leora's name? It was in bold, twice. "Is there a mistake?" I asked, though my voice sounded flat, like I already knew the answer. The attorney blinked slowly. "I'm afraid not. According to the documentation, your mother was of sound mind and expressed clear intent to revise her previous will. You were listed in the prior draft. This version supersedes it." Deidre leaned in, eyes wet. "Leora was at Mom's almost every day that week. I didn't think anything of it, but now, I don't know." I stared at the paper again. My name had once been written there, maybe just as ink, but it had meant something. And now it had been erased, not forgotten, not overlooked, but purposefully removed. I stood before the attorney could finish her next sentence. "Thank you," I said tightly. "I've heard enough." Deidre followed me to the parking lot, silent until I reached my car. Ardell, if you need anything, if you want to contest, I don't want anything, I cut in. Not from her, not from any of them. That wasn't completely true. I wanted the truth. I wanted the lie exposed. I wanted the record corrected, even if it didn't change the outcome. Back home, I set the legal folder down and stared at the ceiling. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just legal paperwork. It was a rewriting of my life, again, without my consent. Around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Hello? A pause, then a low voice I hadn't heard in years. Ardell, it's Jonas. I stood up too fast, knocking my glass off the table. It hit the floor but didn't break. Jonas, my college boyfriend, the one that got away. Or rather, the one I let go because I thought he had walked away. I know this is unexpected, he continued, but I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. I didn't speak. My silence was permission. Your sister called me senior year, said you were cheating, that you'd had a breakdown and were unstable. I didn't believe her at first. But then, your mom called. She said it would be best for you if I let things go. I sat down. He sighed through the phone. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you by staying away, but I never stopped wondering. My voice came back in pieces. Why now? I saw your name in the news, something about that community award you won last year. It made me wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I laughed once, dry. You didn't make the mistake. You just believed the people who said they loved me. There was a beat of silence. Then, I'm sorry, for all of it. We didn't talk much longer. I hung up and sat in the dim light, the phone still in my hand. That night, I couldn't sleep. At dawn, I walked to the local FedEx print center. The clerk looked half asleep, but I was wide awake. I need to make copies, I said, sliding the mortgage records, bank statements, and will revision request across the counter. When I got home, I placed them in a new folder labeled Truth. Then I opened my journal and wrote, They didn't just steal from me. They built their version of the world on top of mine and told everyone else I was the one lying. But I remember the floor plan. I know which walls are fake. I met my new attorney the next day, requested a full audit, asked her to look into the signature date on the revised will, provided the name of the notary I knew hadn't even been in town that week. Then I asked her to update the property deed, removing my mother's temporary claim and transferring it fully under my control. She nodded. We can begin the process immediately. Before I left her office, I added one more sentence to my journal. This isn't about money. It's about the lie they all agreed to live with. By Sunday morning, the air felt heavier than usual. Not with weather. Columbus was mild that time of year, but with anticipation. The kind that settles over your shoulders when you know the hammer's about to fall. I'd spent the morning cleaning, not out of routine, but restlessness. There was a strange calm that comes from knowing the truth is no longer a secret, and that it now has teeth. I'd just returned from the grocery store, one hand balancing 2 paper bags while the other fumbled for my keys. As I turned the corner onto my block, I heard her before I saw her. You think you can cut me out like I'm nobody? Leora, in broad daylight, on my stoop, voice shrill enough to make 2 neighbors shift their blinds and someone across the street freeze mid-sprinkler adjustment. I didn't flinch. I didn't speed up or slow down. I walked straight past her toward the entrance, bags crinkling with every step. You really think this little power play is gonna stick? She barked. You're just mad that for once I'm the one getting credit. I paused at the front door just long enough to meet her eyes. You did that yourself. The door buzzed open from a tenant who lived upstairs, Mrs. Watkins, sweet but deaf in one ear. She didn't realize she'd just let in a storm. Leora pushed past me before I could stop her, stomping into the hallway like she belonged there. I didn't bother calling her back. Instead, I set the bags down and locked the main door behind us. Let's not do this here, I said lowly. People have lives. Yeah? And what about mine? She shouted. You just blindsided me, Ardell. Lawyers? Documents? You're sick. I didn't respond. I walked ahead of her, letting her noise trail behind. It wasn't until we reached my apartment door that her tantrum took an unexpected turn. On the entry table inside my unit sat a small jewelry box, one I hadn't opened in years. I'd found it tucked into an old dresser drawer while looking for tax records the night before. I hadn't even realized what was inside until I opened it again this morning. Now, Leora spotted it instantly. She lunged forward, ripping the box open, her eyes locking onto the bracelet nestled inside. A thin gold band engraved with AM, initials for Ardell Monroe, a gift from our father on my 21st birthday. His last gift, actually. Leora's face drained. "You still have that?" she asked, breath short. "You thought I didn't?" I answered. Her eyes narrowed. "It wasn't even yours anymore. You never wore it." "You gave it to your boyfriend," I said evenly. "You told him it was yours. You let him wear it like a badge while I spent a year wondering if I'd misplaced it. I needed a gift. It's not like it meant anything to you." There it was. The sentence that somehow cheapened everything and yet clarified even more. "It did," I said, "but apparently, so did I, just not to the people I thought mattered." She tried to grab the box. I moved it behind me and walked to the kitchen counter. "This isn't about jewelry," I said. "It's about boundaries, and you burned through every one of mine." I reached into the drawer and pulled out the folder I'd labeled legal. It wasn't thick, but every page inside carried the weight of years I could never get back. I handed it to her. "What's this?" she hissed. "Read." She opened it, her eyes darting over photocopied bank statements, loan applications, debt recovery notices, all with her signature beside my printed name. "This is fake." "It's filed," I replied. "You can scream all you want, but the notary, the bank logs, the timestamps, they all say otherwise." She slapped the folder shut. "You really think this is going to fix your pathetic life?" "No," I said, reaching to take it back. "But it's going to stop you from wrecking mine." Leora grabbed one of the pages and tried to tear it. Her hands shook. "Go ahead," I said. "Rip it all. It won't matter. The court already has copies. This is just for you." She froze. Then, in a final, desperate act of denial, she threw the folder across the room. Papers fluttered like wounded birds, some landing near the couch, others under the coffee table. I didn't move to pick them up. I just stared. And slowly, I walked to the door, opened it wide. "Leave." She stood there, chest heaving, unsure whether to explode or cry. I said, "Leave, Leora. This is over." She turned without another word. No threat, no apology, no final insult. Just the sound of heels on tile, the brief slam of the outer door, and then silence. I closed my own door. No slamming, no theatrics, just a soft click. In the silence that followed, I knelt and gathered the scattered papers. Each one felt less like a weapon and more like a shield now. By the time the last page was back in the folder, my hands were steady. This wasn't a victory. It was a restoration. The folder sat on my table for 3 days before I did anything with it. I didn't touch it. I didn't open it. I just looked at it sometimes, like it might whisper something back to me. But on the morning of Mom's birthday, I wrapped it. Not in newspaper or packing tape. I took my time. Black satin paper pressed smooth at the seams, a silver ribbon, no card, no note on the outside. Inside the box, I placed 2 things, a silver photo frame, empty, and the court filings that outlined every debt, every forged signature, every lie that wore my name like a borrowed coat. I added a single sheet of paper, folded once. On it, I had written, "I'm not the daughter you wanted at the table, but I won't fund the lies anymore." Then I called a courier service. Paid extra for express delivery to the restaurant where the family dinner would be held. I didn't even ask who RSVP'd. I didn't need to know. By the time the package arrived, I was back at my apartment, sitting on the couch, staring out the window. I imagined the moment the box was opened, Velma gasping, Leora going pale, maybe Aunt Faye putting a dramatic hand to her chest. I didn't expect a call, but my phone lit up anyway. Cousin Rachel first. "What the hell, Ardell?" I ignored it. Then Uncle Dennis. "This could have been handled better." No reply. Finally, my mother. 1-line text. "Why humiliate her like this?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, Because I was humiliated in silence for years and no one asked why. I didn't wait for a response. I powered the phone down and placed it in the drawer next to my old checkbooks and expired coupons. That night, my attorney called. She confirmed Leora hadn't shown up to the initial hearing. No statement, no representative, just an absence. She's hoping this all goes away, the attorney said. It won't. I know, I told her. That night, I didn't sleep much. I got out of bed just after 2 a.m. and brewed coffee I didn't drink. Around 4, I got dressed, packed a small tote with a notebook, pen, and the court calendar printout, and I drove. I didn't go to work. I didn't go to the courthouse. I went to my parents' house, now mostly empty, save for old furniture and dust-covered heirlooms. I parked in the driveway and walked through the back, using the same key I'd had since I was 17. Inside, it was silent. Not cold exactly, but abandoned in a way that didn't feel recent. In the den, my father's old recliner sat just where it always had, angled toward the TV, faded from sunlight. I sat down in it slowly, the leather creaking beneath me like a whisper from the past. I hadn't sat in that chair since before he died. It wasn't sacred, just avoided. Like if I sat in it too long, I'd hear him ask why I was always so sensitive. But this time, I wasn't trying to be anything. Not soft, not quiet, not agreeable. I opened my tote and pulled out the court date notice. Then I lit a small candle I'd brought from home. Vanilla, my father's favorite scent, not that he ever said it. I just remembered the way he lingered in the kitchen whenever Mom baked with it. I stared at the flame and whispered, more to the room than to anyone specific. I didn't break this family. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. No one answered. No thunder cracked outside. No ghostly breeze passed through the vents. Just silence. I stayed there a while longer, watching the flame dance, letting memory and hurt and a strange sort of peace mix in the stillness. When the candle burned down to a stub, I blew it out, packed up my things, took one last glance at the recliner, and left. As I stood at the front door, hand on the knob, I felt the full weight of what I'd done, not out of guilt, but release. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't even close it hard. I just let it fall shut with a click. Final, simple, soft. The door closed behind me with a soft sigh, and I stood still for a moment, keys in hand, jacket still buttoned. It was quiet in a way that felt earned. I drove back without turning on the radio. Not out of sadness, but because silence finally sounded like mine. 2 weeks later, I was knee-deep in cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. The Portland air smelled like wet bark and old books, and the apartment above the bookstore creaked every time I moved. But I liked that. It reminded me I was somewhere new, somewhere honest. I'd taken the smallest unit, a studio with a single window that overlooked the alley, a kitchenette that hummed louder than necessary, and a floor heater that clicked like it was thinking. And yet, it felt more like home than the 5-bedroom house I used to walk on eggshells in. I spent a slow Tuesday afternoon organizing my desk drawers when I found it. An old accordion folder labeled Archived Statements. Most of it was mundane: bank letters, expired IDs, a faded library card from college. But one envelope made me pause. It wasn't marked, just a random printout from an old online account. I unfolded the paper and squinted at the line item. A luxury spa resort 2 towns over. Weekend package, champagne, 2 massages, private suite. Billed directly to my card. I remembered that weekend. I'd been out of state, attending a work conference. Leora had told me she couldn't afford gas money that month. She'd texted me some sob story about Mom's prescriptions and how things are tight right now. I set the paper on the table, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't the charge itself that hit me. It was how easily she'd pulled it off. How natural it must have felt. This wasn't new, I said out loud. This was just older than I realized. There was no rising anger, no sudden urge to confront her, just a deep, hollow exhale, like letting out air I'd been holding for too many years. Love, when it's tangled in guilt, makes a lot of excuses. And I'd made every single one of them. I folded the paper, slipped it into a file marked closed, and kept packing. Later that evening, I placed the last few items on the shelf by my small window. A framed copy of my new business license. Second shelf, Home Organizing Solutions. A printed quote from Maya Angelou, and the photo of my father's old chair, now long gone. Next to that, I placed the empty silver frame, the same one I sent on Mom's birthday. I didn't plan to fill it. Some spaces were better left blank. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. It was her again, Velma. No message, just a missed call. This was the 5th one in as many days. I didn't pick up. A few minutes later, I opened the letter I'd received earlier in the mail. A formal response from Leora's attorney. Pages of deflection, positioning, justification. No apology, not even the pretense of remorse. I read the entire thing, then carefully folded it and slid it into a folder I'd labeled not evidence or legal, but simply past. I stood up and walked onto the tiny balcony that overlooked the alley and the back door of the bookstore below. The Oregon rain had started to fall, gentle, misty, not in a hurry. I pulled my cardigan tighter around me and sat in the metal chair I'd dragged out there. Peace doesn't always come with trumpets or a grand declaration. Sometimes it's just an unanswered call you no longer feel guilty about. A letter you read without shaking. A memory that stings but doesn't wound. I reached for my journal and wrote one final line. I didn't win. I walked away. And that was everything. I used to think peace came from fixing everything. Patching wounds, mending bonds, making sure everyone else was okay. But real peace? It came when I stopped apologizing for protecting myself. When I stopped watering relationships that only drained me. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space I was told I didn't deserve to stand in. About learning that love doesn't mean allowing harm, and silence isn't the same as grace. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom with a backbone. If any part of my journey made you pause, reflect, or feel seen, I'd love to know. What does family loyalty mean to you? Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own story? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something deep inside you. Or just tell me, where are you watching from? And hey, if you didn't connect with this story, that's okay too. I'd still love to hear why. Let's talk about it in the comments. If you believe in the power of truth, healing, and stories that hit close to home, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Because sometimes, the stories that break us open are the ones that put us back together.